Briana Joy Gray had a conversation recently with Zed Jelani. Part of that conversation went a little south because she brought up an issue that she is noticing in particular in left spaces with white leftists who were willing to, I guess, give some type of grace towards Charlie Kirk, but not to what I would say said to even some black leftists, right? So I'll give my own personal account of this, but I want you to see she was referring to these articles in particular. There was one article that was written by Ezra Klein. God, Ezra Klein. I'm sorry, he's awful. There's one article written by Ezra Klein that she highlights in this conversation. This is the article here. It is titled Charlie Kirk Was Practicing Politics the Right Way, again, by Ezra Klein. Now, he goes on to basically talk about how he may not agree with him on a lot of the issues, et cetera, et cetera. He says, you can dislike much of what Kirk believed, and following statement is still true. Kirk was practicing politics in exactly the right way. He was showing up to campuses and talking with anyone who would talk to him. He was one of the era's most effective practitioners of persuasion. When the left thought its hold on the hearts and minds of college students was nearly absolute, Kirk showed up again and again to break it. Slowly, then all at once, he did. College-age voters shifted sharply right in the 2024 election, right? So he goes on to say quite a bit in this article. He says that, people shouldn't glorify his murder, shouldn't glorify his death, etc. But what was kind of interesting is that he seemed to find a way to give respect, right? Give respect for Charlie Kirk. Now, that's the article by Ezra Klein. And then there is another article that was written by Ben Burgess and Megan Day. And this one is through Jacobin. Charlie Kirk's murder is a tragedy and a disaster. They wrote this article here. And they go on to talk about how the assassination of Charlie Kirk threatens to embolden the far right and provide Donald Trump with a pretext for crushing dissent. Escalating political violence corrodes democratic norms and poses a unique threat to the left, right? So in this article, they too, similar to Ezra Klein, at some point they go on to talk about how they find a way to show some type of respect for Charlie Kirk. Now, here's the thing, and we'll get into the discussion with Bree. The thing here is this. I think for me, I can't speak for her. For me, I don't have an issue with them saying, okay, well, this is how I feel about this person, etc. I don't have an issue with that. Where I take issue is that these individuals, Ezra Klein was just recently interviewing Ben Shapiro on his podcast after he released this article and did not pressure Ben Shapiro at all on Israel or Gaza. But Ezra Klein will come after other people on the left. Ben Burgess, who co-wrote this article with Jacobin, in Jacobin with Megan Day there, goes on to say, reasons why he respects Charlie Kirk. He went out of his way basically to find good things to say about Charlie Kirk. But Ben Burgess has also come after people on the left and could not find good things to say. Ben Burgess in particular made a video targeting a comrade of mine, Nick. You guys know him as Socialist MMA on Twitter. But Nick Cruz, he made a video calling him anti-Semitic. This was months ago. It seemed very interesting to me that people like Ezra Klein and Ben Burgess can go out of their way to find reasons to give grace and respect to someone on the right, but they have been known to demonize and discredit or try to find ways to humiliate people on the left, people to their left, and predominantly people who are Black. And this is something that I've noticed, and I called this out a long time ago. And I'll tell you about my experience in this space. But let's first get into this conversation that Bree had on Bad Faith with Zed Jelani. He's a journalist here. Listen to this.
So my impression of Charlie Kirk was that he was racist. He engaged with me in a racist fashion, in a patronizing fashion. I saw Glenn Greenwald, who's a friend and who I, adore, making the case that people who knew him personally liked him. That may or may not be the case. I knew him personally and did not come away with the sense that he was a quote unquote good person, whatever that means. I don't know that that's relevant. Doesn't mean someone deserves to be killed. But I also don't see the purpose of rehabilitating someone's reputation simply because they have been the victim of gun violence. It's again, possible just to not say anything at all, especially in Jacobin magazine.
So for those who are not aware, there was a back and forth on X between Briana Joy Gray and Glenn Greenwald, where Bree was talking about her experience when she debated Charlie Kirk, and how she did not have that feeling that he was a warm, loving person, etc. And Glenn was talking about his experience and how, Charlie Kirk was to him. And I think something that and we'll get into the steam of it in just a second. I think that's something that I notice in particular in progressive spaces, even in the organizing spaces as well, is that some of the white progressives, some of the white leftists, they don't seem to understand that their experience may not be similar as someone like, me or Bree, right? Like that they don't seem to want to admit that there is racism also in progressive spaces. And I'll be the first to tell you that. A lot of times they like to point fingers and say it's only on the right. That's false. That's false. I will say it seems to be more overt on the right when it does happen. So you can easily point it out. But when it happens on the left, it tends to be more covert. And it's not as noticeable sometimes. I talked about this as well when it comes to places like, where I live in Massachusetts, in Boston. Very similar situation where a lot of the racism that happens here is either structural racism or it's covert. So it's not as noticeable. Now, to that point, one of the things that I've pointed out before is the lack of disrespect and the way that other Black left commentators are treated in this space by white progressive and white left commentators in the same YouTube space. This idea that we have to be said professional, that we have to show up with the right credentials, that we have to have graduated from the right schools to be considered a voice in this space just proves my point about that. Because for them, they don't have to have that. They don't have to have those credentials. It helps, but they don't have to have it. They are given the benefit of the doubt, whether they are educated about a particular topic or not. And these are things that more people need to start calling out in progressive spaces. Now, I want you to hear how Zed Jelani responds to her.
Well, I think that I think it goes back to the very first thing we said on this topic, right? Which is that the asymmetry almost seems to be built in, institutional, and historic, right? Like this is generally how the left thinks about the world, right? The left has a humanistic worldview, and it doesn't really like to demonize people. It doesn't really like to hate people. Like that's kind of the whole point. And the fact that it's asymmetric is actually because the left just had different beliefs about the world.
But you don't have to demonize. But even you're sort of doing it, Zed. Like this is not me calling to demonize or hate anybody. Well, it's just to say you. But that's what you do.
Like that's literally how you. That's how you love your enemies, though. Like that's what they're doing is what.
No, laundering.
That's what the left has always believed. That is what the left has always believed. Not what the Twitter people from 2014 believed.
Whitewashing somebody's record. No,
that article had some very harsh. That article had some very harsh criticism of her.
This one didn't do what Ezra Klein did. The Jacobin didn't whitewash his record with Ezra Klein.
Yeah, they did criticize him for sure.
Right.
I know that article. It was a fine article. I mean, it wasn't you can nitpick, but
I can nitpick. So, but even that is frustrating to me because my deepest frustration with all of this is how easy it is. I'm sorry, how easy it has been for white liberals and white leftists to poo-poo the fundamental racism at the core of Charlie Kirk's ideology. And maybe that's like not that maybe that's not that big a deal to someone who hasn't personally experienced it. But when I saw the Ezra Klein article, my immediate reaction, I'm trying to find the tweet that I responded to it.
I don't think it's just white. I mean, that's kind of a lazy racialist critique. I mean, I think Martin Luther King Jr.'s kids put out the same, very similar responses to what you just read.
No, they didn't.
It's very
that's not. Nope. They did not invalidate. They did not try to whitewash who Charlie Kirk was. This is my response to the Charlie Kirk article when it first came out. I tweeted, you can openly argue that Black people are inferior, that they should be murdered for pre-crime, a la Daniel Penny fiasco. The polite liberals will applaud you in the Times. But if you say free Palestine, they'll accuse you of Jew hatred and fire you from your job. The disrespect liberals show for Black Americans is disgusting and disqualifying. I cannot imagine. I tweeted this also, and Jeff Stein said he had a similar thought when he was reviewing this article that morning. If Charlie Kirk.
No, I'm reading the statement from the estate of Martin Luther King Jr. III, Andrea Waters King. This is straight from their statement.
Yeah, they said political violence is bad, and no child should see their father killed. Yeah.
Whether we agree or disagree with the words a man speaks, we must never lose sight of his humanity, nor forget the sacred dignity that lives within each and every person. I mean, that's not a bad statement.
No,
I don't disagree with it.
That is not the same thing as saying he was substantive. Like Ezra Klein's article substantively applauds him for doing politics the right way.
Are you angry?
The article is called "Practicing Politics the Right Way."
But are you angry at the King family? Are you angry at the King family for not denouncing his racism or whatever you think they should be doing right now?
I think you're also falling into this binary trap. The argument is that you have to die. No, wait, let me finish.
You kind of started it with the race baiting. So
let me pause here. So does everybody see what is happening, right? So again, I can tell you from my experience in particular within this independent media space, and also within the organizing spaces, because I'm also an activist as well, right? In the organizing spaces, I seem to have noticed this whatever spillover from DSA, and that seems to be where it comes from. This whole idea that we're only just supposed to focus on the economic issues and not talk about anything else. Okay. But then you talk about other things. It just seems like whenever we would bring up, well, listen, this is happening to Black schools. This is happening to Black educators. This is happening to, listen, Black wealth in Boston is $8 compared to $247,000 for white families. Like, these things need to be discussed. They don't want to hear about that. Don't talk about that. Put it under a blanket, put it to sleep, tuck it away. So they would say not to talk about other issues, just focus on economics, and that's it, as if there is a separation between the two. And that was one thing that really used to bother me a lot. But then at the same time, they would be okay to bring up other issues that focused on other specific groups. And what I come to realize as time went by is that the problem that they seem to have a issue with was the Black. It was the Black people. It was when you brought up Black people. That's when it was a problem. Now, in the independent media space, I can tell you also from experience, there's something that I noticed before I started my show and then after I started my show. Last time I saw, I think, the majority of people talk about police brutality incidents in independent media was the George Floyd case. I noticed that after Biden won the presidency, a lot of the white commentators, the white progressive commentators that were covering police brutality incidents under Donald Trump's administration, the moment that Biden won, they stopped talking about it. They didn't cover all these other police brutality incidents that the rest of us, particularly the Black media, that the rest of us were covering. And I paid attention to things like that. Why all of a sudden we're not talking about these issues now? Is it because of Democrats in the White House? There's a number of stories that I think a lot of us have covered in Black media that I never see white progressive media ever cover. And it deals with them. It deals with like progressive policies, but they don't touch it. Why? We have noticed, and Bree has probably noticed this as well. I have also noticed, again, as someone who's in this space, I got to tell you, it took me time. I started this show in 2021. I worked my ass off. Bree is one of the people who, when she was still on Rising, she brought me on Rising a lot. And that was one of the main reasons I was able to really grow, is because I went on Rising so many times, right? A lot. She also brought me on Bad Faith and my comrades from RBN as well. But one of the things I can tell you from my personal experience, I sat here and I watched white commentators that were not knowledgeable about said issue, didn't have the accreditation that is so much demanded of those of us that are Black. And they went on to spaces, they went onto podcasts and into spaces without having those so-called requirements, not being knowledgeable about said subject. They went into those spaces just fine. But when it came to people like me, my comrades at RBN, others like, and you know, Black Power Media, et cetera, all stuff, like all of a sudden it's, you have to have all these qualifications. But the white commentators didn't have those qualifications. These are the things that I personally have dealt with in this space behind the scenes. So I think what Bree is pointing to here is that the way that Ezra Klein was willing to go out of his way to write what he wrote to give grace for Charlie Kirk, the way that Ben Burgess was willing to give grace for Charlie Kirk, those two said people are not willing to give grace for people on the left, in particular, Black people on the left. Let's continue. It gets crazier.
Well, you never let me even finish the point about that. It's not race baiting.
It's funny that you're like,
Zed, it's not race baiting to point out.
And humanist.
Wait, how am I selectively racist? No, you're accusing me.
Why did you want?
No, you know what? You're just like Charlie Kirk, actually, Zed. You sound just like him. That's hilarious. So, do you wait a minute? Do you think that Charlie Kirk was racist?
Talk about race.
Why do you think? Do you think that Charlie Kirk is racist?
I think he did say some racist stuff. I think you just said some racist stuff with the white liberal.
He said some racist things.
Everyone's a little bit racist.
Wait a minute.
Than you and me.
Wait, I'm sorry. Is Ezra Klein a white liberal?
But why is his skin color?
Is Ezra Klein a white liberal?
I mean, it's pretty racist to focus on the fact that
is Ezra Klein a white liberal? Is he a white liberal?
He's Jewish and people.
I'm getting to that, by the way. I'm getting to that.
People, Briahna, unlike you, secular pagans are raised to love our enemies. Okay, I know you don't understand that. You don't understand what Asian or 90% of Americans
Let's talk about Zed. Let's talk about how much Ezra Klein.
Americans. You are so out of touch with everyday Americans.
How Ezra Klein loves his enemies. Because the entire world is always
a political civil war to you. And of course you don't understand why you don't convince people in politics. Because you're so sectarian. It's like I'm talking to fucking Hezbollah right now, right? A guy was killed and people are just trying to sympathize with his family.
Ezra Klein has been very notably, Ezra Klein has been very notably slow to his condemnation of the genocide in Gaza.
That's not true. A week after the war started, he was opposing it. A week after the war started,
that's
on his podcast, he was opposing it.
It
is absolutely true. I listen to his podcast almost every week. That very first month of the war, he was denouncing the war. He was denouncing the conduct.
Because my recollection was
he did not use the word genocide, but you're right. He didn't use the word genocide until very recently. You're right about that.
Okay, there was a big wave of people who were finally willing to concede what was obvious and a word that many of us were using immediately in the weeks after October, in the days after October 7th, that it was a genocide. So I would argue that denial of the broad consensus of international authority on the subject is slow. If you're just getting to it now, you can characterize that differently. But my point is that, and the point that I was making in this tweet that I read that I wasn't able to finish, was that if Charlie Kirk, it's hard for me to believe that if he had similarly inveighed against Jewish people the way that he does against Black people, that Ben Burgess would have felt as comfortable and chummy with him and would have been as comfortable giving him plaudits for his interpersonal skills in the context of this debate. And I think I had the same exchange with Glenn Greenwald. I didn't. I'm sorry. It's hard when I'm looking at someone who has open contempt for me as a race. He says it, open contempt for me and my intellect because I am a Black woman.
Everyone loves people who are nice to them. That's like the whole point of love your enemy. That's the whole point of love your enemy, Briahna.
Right.
Everyone loves someone who's nice to them. Everybody on the right loves people who are nice to them too, right? Like, that's what the left is about, Briahna. You got into politics very, very late in your life. You got into politics late in your life, Briahna. I'm someone who was raised around civil rights leaders who used to attend their speeches as a child. This is what the left is about, Briahna. I'm teaching you something. Why don't you ever learn from anyone else? You're always lecturing everyone else. Learn from someone else.
Does everybody see the way he became unhinged here? I grew up around civil rights leaders. It just learned something from someone else. Yikes. Like it's just, I think, and I'd have to ask her, but I think the point that Bree was trying to get across is when Bree went into that space with Charlie Kirk, she was disrespected because of her race. Bree graduated from Harvard Law School. She's smart. She's intelligent. Okay. And if I remember correctly, I think what he said to her was that she was inferior because she was born Black, something like that. Very, very smart, very intelligent. And her experience is not the same as Glenn Greenwald's experience. And by the way, I think Glenn Greenwald's a great journalist. I like Glenn as well. Or Zed, Jelani's experience. And she's trying to talk about her experience, and it seems like it's automatically getting shut down. And it brought me back. It reminded me of my experience in those organizing spaces, and also currently now within independent media, where this seems like it's like the idea has to come from white leftists. Can't come from you. If there is a plan to do something, like you can come up with ideas, but your idea is not going to be taken as seriously because, like I said, and I said this before, again, we have to prove that we know what we're talking about. This is something I think white progressives, you really need to hear this for a second. For black people, and especially for Black women, we always have to prove we know what we're talking about first. And for the white progressives in those spaces, you don't. You don't have to prove that you know what you're talking about. You are automatically given the benefit of the doubt because of the color of your skin. And so this brings up another question. I really do think, and I've said this before with progressive spaces and the progressive left, whatever it's called today, before you go after the right and conservatives and call them out for their racism, you need to confront and tackle the racism that is happening in progressive spaces, boo. Let me see that shit happen. Because it does happen. So these people like Ezra Klein and Ben Burgess have gone out of their way to demonize other Black people on the left, especially Black people to the left of them. They weren't willing to find any type of grace there for them. But when it comes to Charlie Kirk, who's on the right, who is white and on the right, they could find grace for him. I saw Ezra Klein interview Ben Shapiro earlier today. Ezra Klein did not push him at all on Israel or Gaza. So what is this really about? Because it seems like to me, it's just about some people just trying to make money. That's what it seems like to me. It doesn't seem like the ideology really sticks as much. I think people just blowing where the wind goes to see how much money they can make. But the point that Bree is trying to make is very valid. And it makes you feel as though when you tell people about your experience, it's dismissed. I feel in this conversation that Zed Jelani is trying to dismiss her experience, but she's supposed to listen to everyone else's. We'll finish up with this part here.
Learn from someone else.
I have ever had on this podcast. Do you know that?
Because most people don't like talking to you.
Wait a minute.
You're arrogant. I'm trying to teach you something.
That's actually not true. people love talking to me. And in fact,
when do you change your mind about anything, Briahna?
Really,
when do you change your mind about anything? I'm trying to tell you that it's worth thinking about the other side of things.
I don't want to diagnose. Let me not diagnose you. But it's honestly a kind of like almost a scientific curiosity, how you manage to be so sort of histrionic and triggered at the most unexpected points in our conversation.
Well, let me ask you this. I remember when you told me Ralph Northam was going to resign. Every black person in Virginia wants him to resign. Guess what happened? He didn't resign, and black people supported him. I literally don't remember. I literally don't remember this conversation. Because your politics is about anger and vengeance and like denouncing people, and like that's not what the left is about. That's not you're way out of step with the left.
I can't say any more clearly that I'm not asking people to denounce Charlie Kirk. This is but the fact that you're falling into this kind of binary reflects a sort of intellectual weakness and vulnerability and inability to understand the analysis.
Let me ask you this.
So if you can't understand the analysis, then we don't have to keep pressing this point. I think the audience is very clear about what my argument is.
I did not go to Harvard.
And I don't especially need you to grasp the subject. So I'm happy to move on to the article that you did.
It's very true.
I also didn't have rich parents. Said actually,
yes, you did.
My mother was
all over the friggin' world. You lived all over the world. A poor person cannot do that. A poor person cannot live all over the world.
My mom.
First of all, pause. Zed Jelani, I lived abroad. I lived in different countries overseas, and my parents weren't rich. My parents were military, and that's how I got that opportunity to do that. So just because someone's living in another country doesn't mean that they're rich or that their family is rich. There's that.
No one should have to reveal the vulnerabilities of their family and their own family's insecurity to score points on a podcast. Hey, YouTube, thanks for watching.
It's a something. If you haven't seen that conversation, check it out. I thought it was very interesting. Like I said, I thought it was just very revealing. And I said this before, oh my gosh, like particularly in the progressive spaces, like you guys, like white leftists, you guys need to check the racism that exists in progressive spaces, which it does exist. It may not be overt, it may be covert, but it is still there. And I can tell you guys from personal experience, this is part of the reason why I know when Bernie was running in 2020, this is part of the reason why I had a difficult time trying to get Black people to support Bernie Sanders. I had a difficult time doing that because they kind of felt like, this ain't, this ain't really for me. This not really, not really welcome here, that kind of thing. I think they need to listen to those things sometimes. Everybody gets critiques. That's just kind of how it goes. But I think what Bree said there is very valid, right? There aren't a lot of us. There aren't a lot of us, I think in particular, in this space. But the way that he kind of just lashed out like that, I found that to be very telling. Very telling. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.